Hi, welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega, and this is episode number 135. After free will, what stays the same? Okay, we're taping on Thursday, what is this? Yeah, Thursday, August 29th, 2013. 135th episode. We've been doing this for over 2 years, and people are beginning to get it. I kind of like look through the YouTube videos pretty regularly, and it seems like more and more philosophy professors from various academic institutions are beginning to like make videos on this. I mean, a lot of times, they're not very well versed in it yet, but I think, with time that'll change. Okay, this show is about like a lot of people, they have very strong, emotional, moral reservations or barriers to understanding that free will is impossible, because they feel that if we were to abandon the concept of free will, that the world would be unmanageable. It would be like anarchy. It would be like, just like we couldn't have a sense of morality, and just it would wreak havoc on reality. So with this show, what I'm going to try to kind of like, just allay some of those fears, because they basically are unfounded, to a great extent, and we'll go into that, in the show. Okay, now, as I usually do, before we start, I want to define what we mean when we say we have free will. I'll refute, I can, quickly refute free will as I'm doing this, actually. One definition that's popular with a lot of philosophers who are compatibilists, they believe that everything has a cause, but they still believe that we have free will. A lot of times they just change the meaning of the word free will to reach that. But a lot of times they'll say, we have a free will if we could have chosen otherwise. If any decision we make, like if we, let's say, decide between eating an apple and an orange, okay, and let's say we decide on the orange, right? They say, well, we could have decided on the apple. And so they, according to that definition, they say, well, that gives us free will. What they fail to understand is that, we could have chosen the apple, but it would have been a different universe. It would have been a different set of circumstances. We would have been feeling differently. More so than that. Let's say we did select the apple instead of the orange. There would have been a cause for that choice. In other words, the basic refutation to free will is that everything has a cause. Okay, just before I go on with that, some people might say, well, in quantum mechanics, they say that not everything has a cause. Some people say that. But it's actually not accurate to interpret reality in that way. But even if we did, even if we let's, for the benefit of, given them the benefit of the doubt, even if we considered that some things don't have causes, apply this to the free will question. If our decisions don't have a cause, they cannot be ascribed to a free will. They can't be ascribed to anything, because again, if you're going to say that something doesn't have a cause, human beings can't be causing them. Okay, so the reason I say this, so basically, the argument, against determinism, causality, doesn't work either. There's a few other ways, sometimes philosophers might say, well, these decisions are the cause of themselves. They just cause themselves. But again, if these decisions are causing themselves, we're not causing them. It's just our will certainly isn't causing them. They're causing themselves. So anyway, that's, to get back to this, could have chosen otherwise definition of free will. If we had chosen the apple, there would have been a cause to that choice, and then there would have been a cause to that cause, because remember, everything has a cause. Everything must have a cause. So the choice of the apple has a cause, and the cause of choosing the apple has a cause, okay? And the cause of that cause has a cause. And what you have to understand about causality is it goes back in time. You can never have a cause following an effect. Sometimes people assert something known as retrocausality, but that's really just a semantic difference. In other words, if you want to call an effect, something that makes a cause happen. You're just changing the words. Again, the effect in that case would come before the cause, and simply it's simply a misnomer. It would in effect, if it's coming before the event that it causes to happen, whatever, it must be a cause. All right. So, all right, more basically than this could have chosen otherwise definition. Basically, the definition is that I can define it in terms of what we're not, okay, or what we are. I said, if we don't have free will, we're puppets, we're robots, we're people-uppets. Absolutely nothing is dependent on us. We're not actually deciding anything. We're not choosing anything. Nothing is up to us. Okay, that's the argument. Okay, free will would mean that if we had a free will, we would be able to choose whatever we wanted, independent of this causality, independent of for example, our genetics that have been determined through decades of research in psychology and neuroscience to basically mold who we are. At least 50% of our personality is genetic. Okay, and to have a free will, we would have to be making decisions completely free, or even partially free, but that's impossible, of our upbringing, our heredity, our environment, how we were raised, who raised us, how what schools we went to, what we learned, what we didn't learn. Obviously, all of our decisions, all that we do, is based on all this data that's stored in our unconscious. Okay, all right. So that's the definition. That basically, if we had a free will, we could have chosen otherwise, and if we had a free will, we could basically override or circumvent these kinds of factors that are not in our control, that in a certain sense take part in our decisions, or in a more strong sense, we could say actually determine the decisions for us. This process of causality means that the Big Bang, through this causal process, moment by moment, step by step, as the evolution of the universe progresses, results in whatever we choose and decide and do at the present moment. All right, so now why is this important? This is important because our world is completely deluded about this. I mean, we were completely deluded. Years ago, we thought that that the world was flat. Okay, it makes a lot of sense to think the world is flat. If we didn't have our advanced geometry where we measure certain things with astronomy, and if we didn't go out there and see from spaceships and all that we're an orb, actually, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to think that the world is flat, right? But okay. So this has happened before. We've been completely deluded, thinking the world is flat, and now we understand it's an orb. But that doesn't really change our everyday, functions. If we want to go to the moon and back and land at a certain place on the Earth when we return in a certain ocean or something, then yeah, I think it's a good idea to understand that the world is an orb. It's rotating. Another kind of a vast. And that's an illusion, okay? I'm going to explain the difference between illusion and delusion. All right, I should do this now. An illusion is let's say, there's these two lines, this diagram with two lines, and the top line has arrows facing inward, okay? And the bottom line has, at the end of the lines, arrows are facing outward, okay? What happens is you look at these two lines, and it seems like the top line where the arrows are facing inward seems longer than the bottom line. Okay, this is a very popular illusion. It's based, it's in psychology books. It's just like an illusion of perception. Okay, but so that's an illusion. Now, if you measure those both lines with a ruler, and you still assert that the top line is longer, that's when the illusion becomes a delusion. Okay, and that's the case in this free will thing. In other words, there's so much evidence, all evidence basically points to the fact that free will is impossible, yet our entire world is completely deluded, in not being able to accept that evidence. Again, like this isn't the first illusion that we've had, the first illusion. I mean, another illusion is, for example, and again, it's very understandable. It would seem, very logical to conclude that everything is motionless, like nothing is moving, right? I mean, this room isn't moving, the things are still. I mean, there's wind and stuff, but that's a different matter. But the idea is like, the reality is we're revolving around the sun at about 60,000 miles per hour. Okay, so that's like, so we're zooming around the sun and we don't feel it. Okay, so like, again, like, but the thing is, like, some illusions, like a flat earth, like a motionless earth, we get them right, but it doesn't really change much in our everyday life. The free will illusion, if we, to the extent when we overcome it, because it's a matter of time, and when you put a truth out there in the universe, like this truth has been put out there over the last several years, last several decades more so, or centuries when it began, it's just a matter of time when the world comes to accept it. And it's the difference between all the blame and guilt and arrogance and envy that are a direct result and inevitable in a lot of cases result of the free will illusion, and our collectively just basically forming a new consciousness, just basically like, perceiving our role in the world more accurately and building a better world as a result. Okay, so it's extremely important. One last thing, there's a philosopher, I like to say this, I should repeat this every episode because it'll give you an example of how big this change is. There's a philosopher whose name is John Searle. He's like the 13th most post 1900, he was born after 1900, philosopher in the world. Okay, they did this survey in 2010. He was ranked number 13 in terms of how many times he'd been cited, his work had been cited by other philosophers. Okay, so like for a book that Susan Blackmore published in 2005 called Conversations on Consciousness, she asked John Searle, Searle, like, if the world were to come to acknowledge that free will was an illusion, what would that mean? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, it's almost a direct quote, that would be a bigger revolution in our thinking than Einstein or Copernicus or Darwin or Newton or Galileo. It would alter our whole relation of our whole concept of our relation with the universe, something like that. And he's right. It would change everything. It would be the biggest revolution in science. That's how big it is. This is, all right? And that's why this is so important. All right. I'm going to get to, the topic, but I want to go through, I explained why causality makes free will impossible. I'm going to briefly, because I've spent so much time on this already, I'm going to briefly go through an explanation of why the unconscious makes free will impossible. Okay, follow this. If you don't get this, don't blame yourself, because what we understand and don't understand isn't up to us anyhow. So how, as well as I can explain it, whatever, that's not up to me. So maybe I could explain it better. So the idea is you make a choice, okay? No, first start with consciousness, okay? To have a free will means to have a conscious will. In other words, if our will is unconscious, it can't be free, because what we mean by free will is we are consciously deciding, okay? If we're doing things unconsciously, I think everyone would agree that's not a free will. So consider this. Our consciousness is a tool of awareness. It's aware of things, okay? To be conscious is to be aware. It doesn't decide things. Now add that fact to the fact that all of our data, our memories, whenever we make a decision, between apples and oranges or whatever, there has to be data. What does an apple taste like? What does an orange taste like? Have we had them before? Have we not? What are we in the mood for? All this stuff. And so all this data, it's not stored in our conscious mind, because consciousness, again, by definition, is awareness. It's not a data storage mechanism. So it has to be stored in the unconscious. Now reason this out. If all this data is stored in the unconscious, and by definition the unconscious is called the unconscious because it's not accessible to the conscious mind, in other words, the conscious mind can't access the data. That's again why it's called the unconscious. That means that the decision-making process has to be at the level of the unconscious, because the unconscious is the only part of our mind that has access to the data in the unconscious. Another way of understanding is that it's not just the data that's in the unconscious, but if the data is in the unconscious, the principles and the process by which we decide, the processes, has to also be at the level of the unconscious. So what happens? Basically, we make a decision unconsciously, we become conscious of it, we become aware of it, and for some reason we've been fated to believe, and this is actually the unconscious doing this, the unconscious, somehow believes that the conscious mind has made this decision. In other words, like the unconscious mind makes a decision, chooses the orange rather than the apple, and then makes us, then believes whatever, that the conscious mind has made that decision. All right, so anyway, so that's another way that doesn't rely on causality to explain why free will is completely impossible. All right, so let's get to the topic. We got about 11 minutes left. So the fear, a lot of people are afraid that if the world comes to really accept this, understand this, integrate this into our religious systems, political systems, educational systems, socioeconomic systems, that's going to result in anarchy, a world without, morals and all. That it will be there will be no personal morality. In other words, we can't hold people accountable. People will say well, I can do whatever I want and you can't blame me because I don't have a free will. Because that's the thing, if you don't have a free will, if we don't have free will, we're not fundamentally responsible. That's the key thing. If we don't have a free will, you might want to blame the universe, might want to blame God, but you can't blame us or credit us for anything because we're just like puppets, all right? We're just, manifesting the will of the universe. So, a lot of people are afraid, well, if the world comes to understand this, to accept this, to implement, its implications, into our institutions, our way of life, we're just it's not going to work. So why, what is going to stay the same when this happens? And again, we can't know for sure when this is going to happen. I think with the internet, instead of it happening evolution, I don't know how many years or decades it took for evolution to go from a theory that Darwin devised to being pretty much accepted popularly. I mean, even now, 50% of people in the United States don't accept evolution. They prefer to believe that man was made from dirt and the first woman was pulled out of the rib of the first man. I mean, this is true. 50% of Americans actually believe this. But science, basically accepts evolution. So, with the internet, with our basically instantaneous sharing of information often, through the internet to the entire world, it may not take the years or decades that it took for evolution to be accepted, scientifically or generally, aside from people who reject it because of religious beliefs. So this show is going to be about as we were 9 minutes ago, what's going to stay the same in this world, whether it happens 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it's going to happen. I mean, you can't, this kind of knowledge, you can't put it back in the box, whatever. You can't, So anyway, what's going to happen? We're still going to need rules. In other words, there are rules. There are traffic rules. There are rules of conduct in school. There are rules that you have to abide by where you work. There are rules that apply to our social interactions. There are just generally rules that a lot of times are dependent on morals and ethics. A lot of times they're dependent on just pragmatics. It's a rule that when you work, you get there on time, whatever, or you leave at a certain time, or that whatever, rules. All right. The thing is, this isn't going to change any of that. We're still going to have rules. We're still going to have laws. A lot of people are afraid that well, if everybody understands that we don't have a free will, people are just going to say, you can't blame me, they're going to do whatever they want. Why don't we have to worry about this happening, that this, this knowledge that we don't have free will encourage or motivate people to just act with reckless abandon? The reason is because we are hardwired. This is another reason we don't have free will. We're hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That means collectively as a society, if somebody's doing something that we consider dangerous or harmful or negative to the general population or even to themselves, to other people, we're not going to allow it because, like, we're going to base, fine. What will happen is, like, we'll tell this person, listen, we understand your dilemma. We understand you did what you did, whatever it was, and it wasn't really up to you. It was not up to you in any way. We still have to, quote unquote, punish you. We still have to kind of like have the act have consequences for two reasons. One, what we learn in psychology, what's called operant conditioning, is that, like, when we offer rewards to people, that gives them an incentive or motivation to do whatever we want them to do. And when we punish people, when we offer a punishment, that creates a disincentive, for people not to do that. And now, granted, everything is all predetermined, what's going to happen and all, but this is how the predetermination works, okay? Like, rewards induce behavior, punishments minimize them, or all right. And the other reason related to this is that it's not just about the reward and punishment of the people, it's about deterrence. In other words, like, if we reward positive, lawful behavior, more people will be, lawful and positive in that way. If we have laws to prohibit certain behavior, it'll act as a deterrent to other people doing that behavior. Okay, and again, like, even with, like, with people who have, like, broken certain laws, we can use punishment, fines, maybe some jail time or whatever, we can use that to rehabilitate them, to recondition them essentially, but it'll be much more compassionate, okay? In our system today, we say they're evil, they're cruel, they're criminals, they're convicts, whatever, and we really, we hate them in some cases, we don't show them respect, we really treat them really, really badly for things that were not in their control at all. And so, like, fine, we're gonna have to, like, uphold rule of law, certain laws and regulations and all, but we'll do it in a far more compassionate way. Okay, what stays the same after free will? We're still going to be learning, we're still going to be growing, in other words, like, I've been, like, determined to know certain things. I know that we don't have a free will. I know how to talk about our not having free will. I know how to, like, lead meetings about our not having free will. Fine, this is part of my learning and growing, okay? It helps me to evolve as a person. There's a lot of things I don't know. I don't know how to, like, say, how to talk sometimes without saying likes, ums, and you knows. I mean, I say them a lot. And it's a curiosity that I say them because, like, I know this, I've known this for a long time, and for some reason, the universe apparently wants me to continue doing it, because otherwise, if it didn't want me to do it, to say these things, it would have stopped me long ago. So that is, we still have a lot of ways that we can learn and grow and become better people, even not having free will, even the world understanding no one has free will. Life still has meaning and purpose. Okay, there's, our basic meaning and purpose as human beings is to be happy, to be good, to share happiness, to create a happier, more good world. That's really our fundamental meaning. But to the extent that we understand that nobody has a free will, it really isn't our meaning, it's meaning and purpose. It's the meaning and purpose of God, if we want to, like, talk in terms of that are theological, or the universe of the Big Bang, if we want to talk in physical terms, in secular terms. So basically, like, and even with that, okay, like, if we say, fine, it was like all the meaning belongs to the Big Bang, that doesn't answer it completely, because then we end up asking ourselves, well, what happened before the Big Bang? The Big Bang is the beginning of our quote-unquote known universe, but logic tells us that it, didn't just, like, spring from nothing. That's the kind of principle we hold to be axiomatic, a priori. It's like nothing just comes from nothing, all right? So anyway, so, like, what else will stay the same after our world overcomes free will? Love will stay the same. People will still fall in love with people, and I mean, like, think about it. If we had a free will, we would say, well, I want to fall in love with this person, so I'm going to will myself to fall in love with this person. People know that that's not the way it works, okay? So basically the universe brings people together, has them fall in love, has them procreate for the universe's purpose, and then It imbues us with a sense of personal purpose for that, but again, it's not ours because we don't have free will. So again, love will survive. We'll love other people, we'll love, things, we'll love concepts, we'll love the world, we'll love groups of people. That's not going to change. Okay. Religion, for the most part, is going to stay the same because religion is, to a great extent, about trying to motivate us to do good. Now, their big mistake is like this concept of the free will. They said, well, like, you've got a free will, and like, if you do bad, you're going to suffer eternally. After you die, you're going to go to a place where you're just going to like suffer for eons. I mean, and so they thought, well, if we scare the hell out of people like that, then maybe it'll induce them to do good. All right, so fine. Religion is going to have to, it won't be able to like threaten people and little kids as it does, which is really wrong, with this hell punishment. But it still will be a source of community for many people. It will still be a source of morality. In other words, again, morality is not going to evaporate. It's not going to disappear. But we'll just recognize that it'll actually give, with religion, forgiveness is a very important concept. So as we abandon the concept of free will, we won't have a reason to forgive technically, because technically forgiving is about something that somebody does wrong, something that someone does wrong out of their quote-unquote free will. But if they don't have free will, there isn't anything to forgive. So anyway, religion will basically stay the same. And lastly, because I'm running out of time, I have less than a minute, we will still seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's who we are. That's where we're hardwired to always seek pleasure and avoid pain. And that's another reason why we have no free will. In other words, if all our decisions are based on the prediction that certain actions will overall, within a certain equation, lead to greater pleasure than pain, that's how we decide. We can't but decide that way. Sometimes we'll run a marathon because it'll feel so good to have run it. Sometimes we'll do, some sacrifice because it'll satisfy our conscience. All right, well, I hope you understand why we don't have a free will and why after our world acknowledges that we don't have a free will, the world is going to stay basically the same in a lot of ways, but it will change profoundly in a very, very important way. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Exploring the Illusion of Free Will.